Okay, welcome along to this part of the day. Anybody standing in front of me here who put an idea on the window?
Yeah, there was quite a few.
But you're all being shy now. Graham, fantastic. So the idea here is you have a minute, you pop up to the mic, you present your idea, and then see whether people applaud. It's as basic as that. And actually, if you want to interact and ask questions, then that's great as well. I'm actually looking at our politicians and wondering if they've got any ideas. Well, hey. There was a joke last year when we did this session. When we started, Willie, you'll love this. When we started this session, and it went into the, I think it was the Herald Diary, it went something along the lines of, and so Ross Martin asked for an idea and Tavish walked out the building. I feel like I'm picking on you guys, Willie. Look at that picture of Jim, which is a bit nothing to do with me. Graham. So we're going to have a think if you've got a particular idea yourself. If you've not got one, I'll pitch up with one of the ideas from the window. But we're going to kick off with Graham. I've no idea what Graham's idea is, but he's going to tell you. Graham, the floor is all yours.
I must admit, Ross, when I responded to your question for people to identify themselves, I had no idea I was going to be invited to speak about it, but it's more questions than a particular idea, perhaps. A lot of the discussion this morning was about communities and identity and ownership and vision. And the question I had is not very original at all, is there a real issue in this country meaning both Scotland but also the UK as a whole, whereby a disproportionate amount of funding is allocated from central government, be that in Westminster or be that in Holyrood, and is not one of the barriers to creating communities with more sense of ownership, a facility for them to raise more money themselves, and also if things go badly wrong, their local communities lose out, and that will create pressures for more identity, for more participation, for driving up standards, and I think possibly in some instances for coherence. I accept it's not an answer in itself, because I think one needs mechanisms to ensure that there's some kind of sharing of resources in such a way that clearly very impoverished communities or city regions get an allocation of funding from central government, but I do think we need to move in that direction.
Okay, great. Thank you, Graham. So, anybody want to ask Graham a question on decentralising the budget? I know in Scandinavian countries it's common to have 85-90% of the national budget decentralised. Marco, you're nodding away. Do you want to make a point on that?
General agreement, yeah. In Sweden, I believe there's a system that operates not unlike a taxation system that simply redistributes money from the better off communities according to how well they're raising income. And certainly that sort of thing is the kind of blue skies thinking we should have.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a point as Barry's going to line himself up for the next idea? Alison.
I want to respond to that. I personally think that local authorities should still have the ability to raise revenue themselves. We don't have that currently under the national government, and I think it's more local, and there's maybe more of an understanding at that local level about what would help local people best. But I agree entirely. I think we should be raising money locally, and the more we devolve that power to our local communities, the more they'll feel part of it. Yeah.
Well, you may as well say something, and that'll be a nice fine warm-up to the next session.
I'm really bitterly disappointed. I'm going to have to agree with, because I think money should be devolved at a local level, as long as you've got that distribution mechanism in place to make sure it's fair across the country. But that would empower people to make decisions in their own communities. So I think you're spot on.
Fantastic. Round of applause for Graham for stepping up first. Barry.
I'm going to be quite consensual and just continue this narrative on localism. I think what we need to do is have a serious discussion about actually localising the local government we have, because let's face it, it's not local. Or do we want to centralise everything? Now, I think there's a clear thrust of what we'd agree on, and if it's about localism, let's pilot e-democracy. Let's virtualise all community councils and target the youth to become involved in this, because I mean, I'm quite disappointed, I have to say, about the growing disenchantment, apathy that faces our politicians and our political classes. And I think the untold story of this election will be the lack of participation, actually. Even though the SNP targeted the youth vote brilliantly, I think that's going to be the key factor coming out of this election. And more an idea than an actual concrete notion. So, apologies.
Any points, questions for Barry? Or anybody got another idea they want to pick up on before I pick one from the windows?
How would he engage young people in a manner differently to young Scott, for example?
Do you want me to come back to that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think we've got mechanisms like Young Scot and Youth Parliament, and I'm going to be slightly controversial and say that they're elite-led. I don't think they target the apathy that truly exists in Scottish communities, and something completely different is needed, something that actually targets kids well in school, so that you have proper citizenship training.
Well, then you want proper citizenship taught by modern studies,
Well,
amongst
absolutely.
other things. And many schools don't have modern studies teachers, so actually there is a question of the training of modern studies teachers.
Completely, there's a deeper issue here, and it goes back to education, it goes back to the curriculum, and that is that a lot of kids, first of all, don't understand politics, they don't understand the political system we're actually involved in, and there was a clear example of this. The SNP government in the previous session piloted a directly elected health board, but they didn't team that with a concentrated effort to actually educate kids on what an election was, because they reduced the voting age to 16 for the first time, which I think is to be applauded, but there has to be more of a joined-up approach here to actually proselytise the benefits of benefiting in elections, which I don't think a lot of people are really hearing.
Okay, so you're getting the theme here. An idea, some questioning, a bit of robust exchange, and next up with an idea. Coming from the back? Yes.
Thanks. I work for WRVS, which is one of those wonderful organisations with an acronym that nobody understands. Well, not many people do, okay. We provide services for older people, and one of the things that we think there should be more of a focus on is prevention. The moment local authorities, central government, the NHS, all have duties to provide services at point of need, they don't have any duties to prevent need. Were we to invest in preventing need, we would save a lot of money down the line, we would produce better health outcomes for individuals, so they wouldn't be being admitted to hospital, so they wouldn't be having to be moved into high-intensity care homes. This is a win-win, and it's something that I think could be done really very easily, and it would really shift the balance of care.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yes.
How would that impact on a newly integrated health and social care function?
That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I think actually integrating health and social care is the answer that people have come up with to this. There are a whole range of problems with it, though. A lot of it's based on relationships, where they have got an integration of health and social care, like in Northern Ireland, doesn't necessarily work any better. What I think we need to do is change the way in which we think about public services and use them to prevent need rather than dealing with need once it arises.
Absolutely.
Sorry, have you done any pilot project on preventive spend and co-production to demonstrate the point?
Yes, we've just released a social return on investment study that we did in Leicestershire. I can forward details of that if you're interested.
I'd be very interested, actually.
It produced absolutely fantastic results, savings of multiples of 3 and 4.
Because at the BEFS meeting with Historic Scotland at Castle last Friday, I put a civil servant rather on the spot by complaining bitterly, first of all, about silos and lack of integrated thinking across departments in a small government, in a small country, which is a very real issue. And the other as to whether there was evidence to demonstrate the benefit of preventive spend of that kind. So I would be very interested to give it to them as well, if I may.
Great, thank you, Peter.
More of a principle, I think, than a policy. Sorry, Gordon MacRae from Shelter Scotland. One of the few areas at the last election where we got cross-party consensus
was that people shouldn't pay any more tax on the property in which they live. And given that the greatest growth in personal wealth has been the growth in house prices, is it not time to return to the principle that property is wealth and that people should pay a return on the wealth that they hold, and that maybe it's time to look again seriously for the first time at a land value tax?
I'm just going to say, what about the role of a land value tax? But also I was thinking with regards to bids, the two things needn't be anathema to each other. Could the case be made? I mean, if we live in a time of recession, revenue needs to be raised. If it's pitched in the right way, it doesn't have to be seen as a wealth destroyer, but it does. I would argue the idea of a land value tax. It is possible to argue across parties that it would be just, it would be sustainable, it would be acceptable. But you'd have to place it in the right way, argue it in the right way. But the amount of revenue that would be brought in is astonishing.
You could, to link it to this morning's conversation, you could also link it to the redevelopment of town centres by ensuring that people don't sit on vacant commercial property, and that we bring town centres back into places to live. And that no longer can you sit and wait for on a parcel of land or a property and wait for it to go back up. So again, it's a principle and more than a concrete policy, but how do we ensure that people who sit on wealth, who benefit from that position that they have, and especially at a time when the younger generation now are completely locked out of that whole swathe of accommodation and property, how do we see some form of, dare I say it, redistribution?
Yes, I agree.
So would doing a land value tax like that not push young people further out, though? Because you're going to increase the value at the sort of monthly expensive for someone living in an expensive area. I am young, I am a homeowner, and I just sort of could just afford my council tax and my bills and my mortgage at the minute as it is. If that was added on top, how on earth could I afford to live?
Well, it'd be instead of your council tax. So it would replace the local form of taxation that they have just now. And I think it's about saying you don't pay, land value tax works by you pay the value of the land rather than the property, and it ensures that where there is brownfield sites that remain undeveloped, where there are areas of commercial land banking that sit for a long time, more to keep competitors out of a marketplace than to actually develop them in the interest of the community, that there's a financial penalty unless planning permission is developed upon and unless the community asset is realised for the local area.
Thank you, Gordon.